my idea originally to do this was an opportunity to use the people that my network, the people that I know, and I think a pretty good cross section of people, to allow people that don't know each other or maybe have different views than each other or just would never normally interact with each other, have an opportunity to talk. So that's kind of where the idea came from. And also, obviously, after George Floyd was killed on that Monday, the news kind of hit Tuesday, and then Wednesday things started to pick up a little bit. And I followed a lot of it just through social media, and it seemed like there were a lot of people with a lot of things to say. And I think one of the drawbacks of, like, say, Facebook as an example, is you're always talking to your own friends in your circle. And then people post things that they agree with, and everybody in their circle generally agrees with them for the most part. And then you're just kind of always talking to the same audience. And so I just wanted to have a platform, be able to provide a platform for people that I know that don't necessarily know each other or do know each other, but wouldn't normally have these kind of conversations, to be able to get together and have a conversation. So that's where the idea to do this started. Because I think that's probably one of the more important things, is just normal people like us to just have conversations. And the last two conversations have been really very respectful. And I trust that'll be the case today. And a couple of things that came out of both yesterday and Monday. Some people said that they want to talk about these kind of things, racism, the George Floyd situation, racism in general, but are afraid to, because they're afraid that they're going to say the wrong thing or they might offend somebody. And what really came out of the last 2 days, I think, is people are saying it's better to say something than not say something and say the wrong thing. It's just not to say anything at all, because then there's no conversation. So I hope people feel pretty comfortable enough to share whatever thoughts and feelings they have, no matter how they think they'll be perceived in the conversation, assuming everybody's in a respectful manner. And I'm not going to interview each individual person. It's kind of an open forum type thing. So feel free to chime in at any point on any piece of the conversation. So that's kind of where the idea came from, and sort of what's happened the last few days. So I guess, and so some people may have heard this already if you've been with us before, but I initially, on the Monday, or I guess it must have been Tuesday morning after George Floyd was killed, I saw something on Facebook. I saw a picture, and the person who shared it, he said no words, like his caption or whatever was no words. And I looked at the picture and saw what he wrote and didn't think anything of it, and just kind of scrolled to the next thing. And I think later in the day, I must have seen it somewhere else. And then I realized it was a bigger deal than what I initially saw when I passed it. And then I saw the video and got more into the story. So that's kind of how I was introduced to the murder of George Floyd. And then after that, spent the next 2 or 3 days watching all the evening news of all, I watched locally, I watched nationally, of the protests and the riots and the violence and the fallout from that. So that was kind of my introduction to the situation. And I wanted to figure out what I could do to help, and not just like help on a smaller scale, but just help more in general. And this was kind of the best idea I could come up with, is just get people together who would be able to at least speak and have a conversation. Because I think that's a big piece that's missing, is actually having a conversation and having a place to where you can feel comfortable having that conversation. So that's sort of the genesis of it. So yeah, I guess I'm just interested in people's initial reactions, like how when you first heard about what happened, what you were thinking. So if anybody wants to jump in and kind of get started there, just from I most likely found out on that Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon, just what your thoughts were, what kind of was your feelings?
I'll start. I saw the video, or before I watched the video, I saw several posts on Facebook that I could have linked to watch the video, but I didn't watch it right away. I knew I would. I didn't really know what was going on. And then I watched it Tuesday morning, and assuming most or all of us have actually put that time in to watch it, it's just this agony of why is this not ending? Why is nothing changing? And knowing, I think at that point we already knew that he had passed away. It's like watching a movie for the first time. You know the ending of it. You don't like the ending, but you're trying to figure out why this happened. So obviously,
You're saying, Kurt, you're saying you're watching and you're like, why isn't this?
Yes, like why? How is this happening?
Why is he not getting off of him? You mean, or
why this man calling for help is getting no help? That it was mind blowing, and I think that seems to be what captured the nation of the world, that there was no dispute. And I think the first indication to me that how can you dispute that this was murder is a member of my family who I suppose in previous situations maybe wouldn't have always sided with the person being murdered or killed by the cops, sent me a text later like they murdered him, and really just flat out clear indication, someone that would maybe not always see it that way. And I realize, okay, if this person is seeing it as clearly, then I think everyone's going to see it clearly. And this is a really big deal. I couldn't imagine how big of a deal it became in all the ways that it has. But hopefully through the horrific moments that he suffered and we all witnessed, that amazing things will happen for this country and the world, and bringing equality in all the ways that it's needed for Black people, obviously, but anyone that's being slighted by the system, maybe things can actually start moving in the right way.
Can I pick on you off the bat, Leslie?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
of course.
There's a cross section of people. Leslie and I went to college together at St. Cloud, as did a couple other people in this conversation. But you grew up pretty close to that area. I did. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Right around the corner, 1 block away.
Right. So, so other than obviously the event itself and the murder, I got to imagine your feelings went back to you walking down the street as a kid,
mm-hmm.
and neighborhood.
Yeah. So I've never witnessed a police officer killing anybody in the street. So I'll be clear with that. But I've been around for all of the murders that have happened in Minneapolis to date. All the way back to Tysel Nelson back in the day. I remember being young and hearing about that, and really having your eyes open that, you know, you can be killed and nothing will happen to the police officer. They can get away with it. But growing up on the South Side, we saw a lot of police brutality. I had 2 older brothers that were often harassed by the police. I had friends that were harassed. It was almost like just a commonplace. You know, people would get beat up by the police and they would keep moving. Like it was just a normal happening. Walking to Cup Foods to shop, we would be taunted, not just by police. Police would say things to us like, you know, go home, or, you know, call us niggers, do all kinds of different things. We've experienced it all in that particular area. So it definitely hit home. It's very heavy.
So to piggyback on what Kurt was saying before, like when you were watching the video, Kurt, and how you were reacting to it, and like, or you said you know, what made it different for you is maybe when your friend or whoever it was like, they straight up murdered this person, and that person might not have had that view in the past. I know for me personally, when I was watching it, it was one thing that doesn't get talked about, or hasn't been talked about as much as, you know, people were telling the police officers to get off and whatnot, and, you know, he can't breathe and whatnot. But I think at one point I remember hearing George Floyd, like they said to him, "We'll get off of you if you get up and get in the car." And my thought, and he said something like, "If you get off of me, I'll do it." And I was like screaming back at him, like, "Why don't you get off of him? Why don't you get off of him then? He can't comply if you're on him." You know what I mean? And I haven't heard very much being talked about that component of it. I mean, obviously there's been the story about, you know, when he was kind of slipping away, he started calling for his mama, and that was very powerful for a lot of people all across, you know, all across the country and the world and whatnot. But it's just, we've seen this video before. We've seen this movie before, time and again over the last however many years. There was the same, the issue in New York City when it happened. When was that, about 10 years ago, right?
Eric Gardner was
right. Yeah, it was New York City, and the same thing. I can't breathe, and
yeah, that was just a couple years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess something about this feels different though this time, and I don't know if it's the perfect storm about like so much happening in succession. This case with the case down in Florida. With the guy that was jogging through the neighborhood and was basically lynched in broad daylight.
Georgia.
What it was.
Yeah.
It was lynching. You know what I mean? And we talked about it yesterday on the call. The case of the white woman in New York City basically playing up the fact that I'm a white woman and I'm going to say you're threatening me because I know it'll get, it'll seem worse for you, it'll make it worse for you kind of thing. The Amy Cooper incident. So I guess I want to know, for those of you who are, does this feel different to you? Do you think that this is really going to change things, or are we going to, in a week forget about this? Like the country has time and again.
I'll speak really quickly. I don't think in a week we'll forget. No, I think this has taken on such a huge presence across, the world, across the globe, that I think the type of attention that we're getting. But to answer, you kind of asked two questions, Neil. You asked, does this feel new to us? It doesn't. I mean, this is a movie, like you said, we've seen play out over and over and over again. We're getting tired of being hopeful. I was really hopeful that with Philando Castile, things would be different, since that was such a blatant, taped, videographed incident. And then you've seen the outcome of it. So it's hard when you've been slighted that many times, and I use slighted very lightly, but when you've seen Black men and women killed by police officers over and over and over again, no, it doesn't feel different. It's still as hurtful as it was when it was Amadou Diallo or thousands of others that are nameless and that are not hashtags that you hear about and about, and the ones are happening and you don't hear about. So for that, in that regard, no. But do I think this is the biggest I've ever seen something of this nature take life? Yes. It's probably the biggest protest that has ever happened, and somebody can correct me on this call, in the history of, if you want to call it civil rights or Black Lives Matter or a Black movement, ever. And so in that, I'm hoping that it doesn't fizzle out and it doesn't die down. Definitely not in a week, but I'm hoping in a year from now, we are still having these open dialogues, and we're still progressing and doing something about the situation.
And somebody mentioned this the other day. I think maybe it was on Monday's call, and somebody said that maybe the difference that we're seeing in this situation is there are a lot of white people that are mad, and outwardly mad and actively mad, where maybe they're mad before, but maybe not as public, or they weren't mad, and maybe changing some thoughts. So that might be different. But whether that makes a long-term difference or not, we don't know. But and obviously social media plays into it now, because we have information coming to us every second. But I don't know if people want to discuss that point. But as far as
Ronnie, let me chime in. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So beside my screams and watching that, it put you right back into the documentaries that I saw from the 60s. And I was 4, 5, 6 years old when they released the dogs in the water, which caused the same outrage. And if you're younger, you may not remember that, the walk across the bridge and the dogs. And that united not only America, but the world, because it was the first time ABC, CBS was showing that live. And so for me, it had that same type of momentum, energy, because it's not that enough is enough, it's that I think the world, and I think youth who have grown up in multicultural, hi there girls, and multicultural environments
Roxy.
now have the voice, they have the friend. So I don't think there are not many people that could not place a friend of color that they know in that same situation, which brings, as the quote of Ben Franklin said, you'll get justice when you have the unaffected as mad as the affected. And I think that's what we see. So from my old perspective, it feels like change. It feels like what it felt like in the 60s, what it felt like in the 70s. It is our job to take this and walk it to the many different beams of light that it can have. You will have people that will make use of the situation for their own individual opportunities. We must make those people a footnote in history while we move on in any way we can, whether it's our singular voice, our cultural voice, our spiritual voices. We have to move this conversation to a not just a transformational, but a not just transition, but transformational, almost allowing people to, even if they don't know what to say or how to say it, to say it. I do the mediation conflict resolution for the last 22 years. So my monicum is silence is violence. We have a pool of communication. And if you're not putting something in that pool because you don't think it's going to come off right, put it in a smaller pool. Put it in a pool that maybe it's only a pebble and someone can help you to own your voice, to hear your voice. For some people, it's probably the first time they've seen, other than in a movie, something so dramatic that they can now say, I cannot deny that something happened differently in a community that's different from mine. So what we're looking at are different people's truths. And some people will have to do something differently with their truth because they had a different narrative going on for such a long time. So for me, I see, oh my goodness, big change. We can't let it slip away. And we're just going to have to deal with the part of us that says, oh, nothing's going to change. And you know what can change? You, your own attitude, your own thought. If no one was, of course, where I am, no one's going to dare bring anything up. So today I brought it up. And I brought it up in the context that I saw an old newsreel from South Africa. And they had, in the 60s, they would ride around in these trucks with wooden frames on them. They'd stop in a neighborhood and take out shotguns and just shoot any black person they saw. And that was just something that blew my mind all around because the whole community accepted that that's what they did in South Africa. But when the Africans got tired, things changed. And out of that came Mandela's movement and everything that we've seen since. And it took centuries. So hopefully it doesn't take us centuries, but we've been having this for centuries. We're 400 years in to systemic racism, and you have one of the advisors of the president mentioned today that he does not believe that there's any systemic racism in the United States. I couldn't read the rest of the article. It was his truth. He might have to learn a new truth. His narrative will change, so his story will change.
Auntie Roxy, is it all right if I explain a little bit about who you are? I know you got.
Sure.
So that's my Aunt Roxanne. I know she mentioned she was one of the old people, but she's not the oldest person on the call because she's my dad's little sister who's on this call. But her husband was a career Army. How long was he in?
22 years.
22 years. And they've lived around the world, Germany, Panama, Hawaii, Georgia, England, and probably some places I might be forgetting.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when she brings her perspective, it comes from places and things and experiences that none of us haven't even gotten close to. So I appreciate you sharing that. And then her daughter is next to her, Cynthia. You can't see her either. She's a major in the Army.
Hey, Ron.
Yeah.
I can speak a little bit maybe for the, what you were talking about a couple minutes ago about white people saying enough is enough, right? So first of all, thanks for hosting this because I know on Monday I was on the call and we had people from California and Alabama and Texas. I'm 25 miles south of Minneapolis. You know where I live, and I might as well be in California. I mean, I work downtown, obviously with COVID. I haven't been downtown since March. So we're just kind of in this echo chamber. I work right here in this office every day. So thank you for allowing this discussion, for me to get outside of this echo chamber that I'm in a little bit and actually talk to real people with real experience and people that live in Minneapolis. It's great to hear from them as well. But I think, I texted you after you said you were going to set up this discussion. And I said, thanks for doing that. I think it's a really good idea because there's a lot of us. I'm a 41-year-old white dude in the suburbs surrounded by other white people. And I haven't found anybody yet that's watched that video that says, one person actually in the neighborhood Facebook group who was defending the cops and, whatever. But for the most part, across the board, people that I have, experienced in the past, kind of like what Kurt was saying, it's indefensible. But what they've done, and, this is a place where, we can have a little bit of a voice because I asked you, Ron, I feel helpless. I don't know what to do. What do I do? And it is speaking up. What I've noticed is people changing the narrative, right? I've already seen people come out and say, well, he's a drug addict. Why are we celebrating this guy, that was high, just things like that. They did the same thing with Castile. He smoked marijuana. You start to change that narrative a little bit. And so I think the voices have died down of the people that aren't comfortable with the Black Lives Matter movement. But, that's their way of saying, because they can't come right out and say, I'm uncomfortable with this, you know what I mean, in this point. So anyway, that's just kind of some perspective that I've seen is, it's still out there. It's just people are changing kind of the way they're approaching it and putting it out there.
I think you bring up a good point, which kind of leads into, and we talked about this on one of the other calls, the murder happened and then all of a sudden the riots happened and then people changed it and then weren't like people who were mad were all of a sudden mad because of all the destruction and all that, but then weren't mad about the murder and the events. And some people may have even forgotten about that and completely changed the narrative in that aspect, I think too, is another part of what you're talking about. You just change the conversation, you get off what the problem was and you just talk about, well, why aren't we talking about this other problem over here, and you ignore what the bigger problem.
Yeah, because they don't want to talk about racism, is really what it comes down to. Yeah.
I'd like to kind of jump in here, and Ron, I'll just kind of say the same as thanks for putting this all together. I want to go back to what Leslie was saying, the contrast between what maybe a white man would say in this instance versus an African-American man or woman would say is that this is not a new story. And for some reason, it's different this time for all of us, white individuals that live with this privilege. I've found myself going, geez, what is the deal? Like, I've seen this too. Why is it different for me inside? Like, I'm trying to wrap my head around it. And I don't know what it was, but for some reason it clicked as it's me. Like, it's me. I'm a part of this. Like, I've been complicit the whole time. I would just be okay. Not okay. I'm never okay. I consider myself a progressive person, but you just go, Jesus, I can't believe this happened. This is the worst. I wish someone, I'll put a meme up there. I'll be, show my outrage on social media, but if I reflect back on just, how I perceive the world and what systemic racism really looks like and what it really means, like, I live in it. I I basically have benefited from it from as a baby, and I haven't seen it. And I don't know what it was, but at this point I go, well, yeah, it's me. It's all the systems that have protected me that has changed. I recognize that now, and I understand to an extent why people are really pissed, why I'm pissed, and why things have to change. I try to challenge myself, and why am I feeling this feeling of, yeah, of course, why wouldn't someone want to burn the place down? Why wouldn't they? That anger is real. That it is justified. And so I think not until this moment have I really just taken a real stock about how I perceive the world, how I perceive the people with me. And I'll just be super transparent. I mean, I've known Ron for 30 some years, it feels like. Not once can I recall a moment where we've had an honest discussion about the way I look, the way he looks, the way the world perceives him, and the way the world perceives me. Not once. I'm ashamed of it. And so I've been kind of coming to grips with, what does that all mean? Why am I not educated? Why haven't I educated myself about what systemic racism has looked like in this country, where it came from, why it's there? So I think, yeah, the story is the same for many, but for some reason this time, for me at least personally, it's been a very humbling experience, and so I appreciate this forum that you've put together, and I'll just kind of.
Yeah, I want to jump in real quick. And Bill and I went to high school together. Then he went to St. Cloud for a couple of years when I was there, and then we've kept in touch since then. But one thing you touched on, which is right, you and I have never had this conversation, but also, and some other people can jump in here, not every Black person wants to talk about what it's like to be Black every single day. At all times, right? Some people just want to go to the movies, right? Or just go hang, and just live and have dinner or do whatever. But I get what you're saying. But please, tomorrow, Bill, do not start calling all your Black friends and asking them what their experience was. But to your point, though, then when do you bring it up, right? So when do you have those conversations? I guess is the other question. But I don't think, and somebody else maybe jump in here, but whatever group, minority, Black, whatever group you are, don't always want to just be talking about like the burden of what it is to be whatever group you're in all the time, right?
Yeah.
We're regular people too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I think.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Ray.
No, actually, I was gonna jump in here. First of all, thank you, Ron, so much for having this. I really think this is really important. I think these are the microcosm communities. Can you guys hear me, by the way? I'm just trying to make sure. Okay, cool. These are the microcosm communities that we need to be able to voice these things. And I think it was great that Ron thought of this idea. So we're here, and I think it's great. And I think I want to piggyback on a little bit on what Bill was saying. I think, Bill, that's great. That's great that you just opened up that way, because that's what we need to hear. You know what I mean? We need to hear that. I think that, that's honesty, that's transparency, that's believable, and it's believable because it's true. And so I think we need more of that honest conversation. I think we're all a little bit guilty of holding something back. I think even, I'm Latino, I'm Dominican, so I probably identify more as Black, in this country because I have had more of a Black experience in this country. And I've had some different types of discrimination as a Latino, as just like my African-American friends have had slightly different discrimination, but we both kind of see it the same, which is why the Black and brown experience has been very difficult in this country for different reasons. And, I'm an immigrant to this country. I face other kinds of racism to immigration, but I still see it with my Black brothers and sisters the same way. But I'm also in a biracial marriage. I'm married to an American white woman, and my kids are mixed, and I have nephews and nieces who are African-American mixed. I have French nieces. I have such a multicultural family, and I know I'm not the only one here who does. So I think that Bill opening up that way, my point is, is a great transparency that we need. I mean, I think at times for me, and I would love to hear Leslie and other people speak up here who are Black or brown on this call, as well as, you know, on the white or Asian side or any side. I think that for us, sometimes we kind of hold it in, at least from my experience. I think that there's been times I have spoken up and I haven't been afraid to speak up. But then there's been other times where I don't feel the energy to do so. I really don't. I just kind of like go, you know what? I want to see the good in people. I want to see the really good in people. So I'm going to go ahead and let this pass. And I'm sure we're all guilty of that. And I would love to hear, you know, Leslie, you talk about that part of it, because I think sometimes we just don't feel the energy, or we feel it's appropriate, or we feel it's the timing to do it. And there's more times than not probably that we're just patching this thing up and letting things somewhat slide within even our own circles. And it could be honest, great friendships like what Bill has with Ron or other friends of his of color. And so I think this is important that we do that. And I would love to hear your perspective on that. I also would love to talk about the parallel of how we got there between the country and the world, for that matter, and Minneapolis in the last 10 years. Because I personally moved away from Minneapolis 10 years ago from my profession and to grow in my profession. But I have family. My wife has family in Minneapolis. I have family and friends in Minneapolis. So I always go back. So Minneapolis is a dear place in my heart. But I have seen an evolution in the last 10 years, especially, of heightened brutality, heightened discrimination. And even from the time I lived there, I was racially profiled. I lived about 8 blocks when I first started my career at Fallon. I lived about 8 blocks from where George Floyd was killed. And I was single. I was a young male. I was living with 2 African-American friends. And we were profiled. You know, I was just coming home from work from downtown Minneapolis, and I was profiled multiple times. Was I beaten? No. But, you know, when you're stopped coming home from work and you're, you know, asked, you know, what are you doing? And, you know, where are you coming from? Oh, you look like somebody we suspect. And you know what I mean? Those type of things. That's the fear we got to live in, because I got to look at the corner of my eye and say, man, are they looking at me because I'm big? You know, I'm Latino. You know what I mean? Those are the kind of realities that we face. And so even when we're not beaten and bruised, we're still beaten and bruised. You get where I'm coming from? It's like, it's not always just the physical beating or the killing. It's the physical beating and killing of the perception that you have to live with every day. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Gotcha. Yeah. I wanted to throw something out there. Nice to hear from you, Ray. Nice. It's been a while. Kind of wanted to, before coming here, I just left a church group. And I'm on the board of my church group has a school. So me and my wife attended tonight, and we meet once a month. And as we were sitting around the table, it's no secret that, you know, with George Floyd, you know, it's been in the news. People have been talking about it, right? But for some reason, as a Christian, everyone around that table, we all are Christians. And then we have a Christian school. And I had told the group I had to leave a little early tonight because I wanted to make it to this. So I left at 7:30. So when 7:30 hit, at no time, it was, let me see, it was probably 10 people around that table. At no time in our agenda or off topic did anyone bring up the ordeal that we are talking about right now. And I tell you what, that bothered me to my core, because, you know, sometimes race is like the elephant in the room and people don't want to talk about it. You know, I left and I said some things, and I'm sitting up here, you know, feeling bad about it because just my tone and, you know, how I came across. And I'm asking myself, why am I feeling bad about it? And I think I'm feeling bad about it is because, you know, I do have a history of speaking up. And I just, you know, just that, you know, I had mentioned yesterday, just that majority silence, that you have the opportunity just to be silent. And that just bothers me to my core. And so one of the people there that I love and care about, she had mentioned, she said, well, James, I thought it would offend you if I'd have brought it up. And I know Sister Roxy had mentioned something about, let me see, what did she just say? She said silent is what? Silent is violent, right?
Silence is violence.
Yes, yes. So she said that, and you know, when you're silent and you don't speak up, you know, you send messages, and the messages, of course, are not positive. And so, you know, when let me see, I think Ray, you had Ray or Leslie, somebody just brought up about, you know, you just get tired of, you know, you get tired of being that voice. And I had told her, I said, it'd be nice if, as I was sitting here, somebody else would have brought it up, and I didn't have to bring it up, right? But again, you know, one thing that I was appreciative of today when I was looking at the news is that when I seen NASCAR say, you know, no more Confederate flags, that right there was deep to me, right? So when somebody said, you know, is there an awareness? Is there an awakening? If NASCAR is saying that nobody can come to their events having Confederate flags, man, that's strong for me, because that's culture down there. That's what they do, and so.
I think, yeah, that's a really good point too, and that's a lot of that has to do with economics and dollars and things like that too. But to your point, if they don't have to do that in NASCAR, they are, and maybe that gets back to the greater point that enough of the right people are getting upset about it and are doing things that can definitely help to change.
And James, I want to also speak to that as well, because I think that this all actually interconnects, like what you're saying, by the way, because it's a great point about NASCAR today. Right. Because what Bill was saying, how it's hard for him to open up, right? What Bill is saying as a white man, I'm just connecting the dots here. What Bill was saying earlier, that's hard for him to say. Of course it's hard for him to say. You know what I mean? I would feel the same way if I was a white man, you know, trying to have, you know, live my life and be fair and equitable, but these things that maybe I don't speak up on because of different reasons. But then you connect what NASCAR did today, you know, obviously after all these years, finally getting rid of Confederate flags. Now connect that to Roger Goodell. Finally, after not 4 years in the short making, so to speak, but if you look at what happened between the kneeling, the peaceful protesting and the kneeling and all the controversy, when it was convenient to stick by the owners and stay quiet, what did Roger Goodell do? Because the media, because of the branding dollars, because of all that, you know what I mean? He stayed quiet. Yeah. I know I work in the advertising world. I mean, advertising executive. And in our world, you know, there's a lot of things that are held back because of those reasons, you know, political siding, all those kind of things. So for Roger Goodell, NASCAR, you know, Bill at this level, you know what I mean, to come out and say things like that and to stand for what they actually truly believe in is part of the problem. We got to get more from corporate entities to government entities to obviously everyday people like Bill. You know, sorry, Bill, for keeping calling you out, but just using you as an example here, but to speak up, you know what I mean? Because that's how we're going to change the tide. So I love what you said here, James, but I just, sorry to jump in.
Gotcha. Nope, I appreciate you adding that.
Yeah, and I want to, if anybody who hasn't jumped in yet, if you want to jump in and say something, go ahead. I don't want 4 or 5 people to dominate the conversation. So if anybody wants to, in whichever direction or anything that you want to react to or bring up or ask, feel free to jump in.
I can sort of add on to what Bill was saying. Like, for some reason, for me, there's something different. I mean, and like, I remember, so last year in Colorado, on the anniversary of the Columbine shooting, there was a woman that the police discovered who was at large in Denver, was very unstable, was a Columbine fangirl, and they shut down all the school districts, every school district in the Denver metro area at the time. I'll get to the point, I promise. Sorry. But at the time, my kids were asking me, like, why didn't we go to school today, Mom? Why didn't we go to school? And there were police at the school. What's going on? And I was like, you know, make up shit on the fly like you do when you have kids. And I said, well, the police have, you know, learned some things and they're keeping us safe today by staying home. And at that moment, like it snapped in for me that if I was a Black woman, a Black mother having that conversation with my Black children, I wouldn't have necessarily been able to say that. And it was like, that was the first time that it really sort of started coming into relief for me. And then for some reason, after George, so I work in advertising too, Ray, and we convinced our clients to really step into the conversation. It's a luxury car brand, so that's not something they're usually comfortable doing. But as a result, it really made me start taking stock of my own attitudes. Like Bill was saying, like I consider myself a really progressive person, very liberal and whatnot. But through some book recommendations, I started reading White Fragility. I watched the 13th documentary. Oh my God. I realized all the things that I had learned growing up in Indiana that were just flat out false. And I've been trying to, I was just telling Bill before I came here, had a conference call with some friends, some white women friends of mine in Chicago. And I was trying to explain all these things that I've been learning, and just trying to help other white people understand the system that, like Bill was saying, has been built to raise us up, and how we can't stand for it anymore. And we have to do something. Like we have to be done with this argument. There can be no discussion anymore. And my argument when my fellow white friends say like, I don't want to talk about this anymore, is like, I am really sorry, but we are going to talk about it. And I will, we'll talk through everything together. And I'm not coming from a place of judgment because I've been guilty of all of it. Like Bill said, like we're all complicit in this. So that's just been my experience. And like Bill knows, I've gone in really, really deep on things and just trying to educate myself and trying to get involved. And, but yeah, I really truly hope that we will start learning as white people, honestly, because that's what we have to do.
I'm just going to add one more thing, and I think this has been like ringing in my head a lot. Killer Mike said one thing on one of the many talk shows that he's been on, and he said, as Black people, we are tired of teaching you. We are tired of it, and he's right. He's right.
He's totally right.
We have to start educating ourselves and teaching each other. So I think that's kind of where I know that's where Jenny's at, and I feel like that's where I'm at too. That it shouldn't be your responsibility as African American, as the African American community to teach us. We need to listen. We need to be
open.
We need to be proactive in being a part of the solution.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's for both Bill and Jenny, and even what Ray Rock was saying, it's okay to have a seat at the table. It's okay to be present when African Americans are having discussions about racism and to listen and to advocate for them and to be a part of the dialogue as well. But it is mostly important for you to listen, and it's also equally as important for you to have your own dialogue. We don't have to be invited for you to have these discussions. There's enough information out there today for you to be well versed in what has happened in America as it pertains to racism. So, but I appreciate dialogues such as these. I'm the only person that spoke and didn't thank Ron. So Ron, let me.
No, don't thank me. Don't thank you. Paid $8
for
a Zoom
to come.
subscription.
This is important. This is really important conversation to have. And, some of us know each other here, but most of us don't, I'm assuming. And so to even show up and have a conversation with strangers is big. It's showing that, people want change and they want to do something about it. So
Yeah, and we said this before you had joined, but that was part of the motivation here too, Leslie. It was to use my network, I guess, of people who know each other, don't know each other, coming from different places to be able to have these conversations. So that was, and I'm really happy that you're on this conversation. Leslie and I, we went to college together. We were in the council students together. We've known each other for a long time and fell out of touch forever. And then Facebook sort of came back together. But yeah, we've known each other a long time, and this isn't the first time she and I have been through this type of.
Oh no,
this type.
We have many of these, unfortunately.
Right, but no. So I'm glad you're here. But yeah, I can't have this if all of you people don't show up. So don't need to thank me. I just got a Zoom account. So no, I appreciate everybody being on here, and some other people are jumping on here too.
Rodney, I'm writing down the quote if people wanted it that Ben Franklin
Oh, yes.
said, and I'm going to add something else. I've had the opportunity to learn how to have very difficult conversations, and one of the very best workshops that I participated in to get certification is from a group that's called Compassionate Listening. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of them, but you can find them on compassionatelistening.org. And they have like 5 facets. When we say these are difficult conversations, or I don't know how to talk about this because I don't know what to say, that group taught me that you, one, have to let people know they're in a safe place, and you speak from the heart, you listen from the heart, and you have what's called the fair witness. Your enemy is your enemy because you have not heard them. And so that's one of the facets that they stand on. And a woman named Jean Kunderson, she began this group. And their largest audience that they present to are Israelis and Palestinians. And they have been fighting just as long as we have in our history. But you can go through these workshops and learn this way to facilitate the dialogue, and then join them and go to Israel and Palestine and bring these groups together. And the reason the groups are coming together is very similar to what's happening here, because you have a little known secret to the rest of the world. Palestinians and Israelis marrying each other. Every grandmother, every grandfather wants to have a relationship with their grandchildren. So you have to get rid of or do something with what is keeping that from happening. So you have this compassionate listening group. They go into high schools, they train teenagers how to have these difficult conversations. Look them up. There's going to be something there that can help you have a conversation that's difficult with somebody you care about. When we look at when this happens, how this happened, in the middle of this COVID-19, it has, death has taken on a whole new concept. We really don't have the time to be fighting this disease of racism when our culture, humanity, all around the world is being stripped of the people that can help it the most. And at some point, it has to be understood that those people that came together to march in the street, what they really said was, coronavirus be damned. This is as important or more important that I stand with my friend, my brother, my sister, my cousin, my not blood-related brother, sister, cousin. That's how important it was. And from that intermingling, you're gonna have more deaths because COVID was out there. But this was important to people to do. And I think it's important that we learn there's time for our pain, and I mean, God, this is deep pain, and there's time for our teaching moments. You can learn in pain, and you can learn when there's not pain. But this has been a oozing for such a long time that just watching George Floyd just rip the scab, and it's been a scab for a long time, and I just rip that scab off, it's going to force you to talk because there's pain. There's systemic pain, there's unbiased pain. There's pain that has been ignored. And I'm hoping, I'm going to be very hopeful out of all of this, that the universe made it for such a time as this. Because even in our climate is streaming out. Pay attention.
Hey, Roxy, you're muffled.
Oh, am I better now?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll stop moving. Is there any part you didn't understand that I need to repeat?
We'll get it on the recording.
Okay. But we have to figure out how to talk to each other. There is anger. There is passion, and some people confuse anger for passion. And I read this book a long time ago. I think I still have a copy of it, and it was called "Why Black People Shout." As a culture, some of us talk very, very loudly, so we have to preface when we get ready to have a mass conversation like this that my talking loud does not mean I'm angry. I just may not know how to channel the passion that I have in what I'm speaking about. So there's a lot we can always learn from each other, but we have to first have the willingness to learn. I think the universe gave us a push. The push with coronavirus and the push with George Floyd. It is horrific. I mean, really horrific that happened. But for now to eternity, we have a picture of what it looks like for a Black man to be murdered just for the fact of his color. And we can't deny what we saw. I mean, I had to literally pull over to the side of the road yesterday because the image is still so very raw and just scream. Would anybody have understood that? That I just needed to scream.
Nate, do you mind if I pull you into this conversation?
Go right ahead.
Okay. Nate's a teacher in a very from high school and college. He played basketball at St. Cloud State, and then we went to high school together. And he's been a basketball coach, and he's a really good friend, and he's a father as well, and he's a teacher. So kids obviously are a huge part of your life. One of the conversations we've had over the last couple of days is just discussing with children what's going on. And I know it's been different for you being out of school with COVID, but I've got to imagine whatever conversations you're having with home with your kids, but then when school starts back up in September, other than, hey, where have we been for 8 months? How do you do you think you address all the things that have been happening, whether it was COVID, this situation with George Floyd, when you're just dealing with kids?
That's a question I keep thinking about all the time. I'm trying to figure out, and each scenario is a little bit different. To kind of piggyback after what Bill's saying, in college, I didn't quite understand the world. The world was so small to me, but now I'm trying to understand, the privileges and everything else, and trying to understand that has made me, I think, a better teacher in terms of trying to understand where people are coming from. I think the first question to me is just asking kids, how you doing? How do you feel? And see if where they go from there. Some kids will take it further than others, but just letting them know that I'm here to listen to them and, reach out. I've reached out to a couple just to make sure, especially with COVID and how schools ended and everything else. It's just interesting to see how life is so different for high schoolers, and putting myself back into those positions. They think their world is so huge, and they're worried about their little area, their little niche, their friends. They don't understand the bigger picture. Trying to get them to see the world in somebody else's shoes. Is it shoes from a single parent family versus my shoes where my parents are still in the same house I was born and raised in, and trying to understand those different pieces and trying to get there. The hard question to answer, I think, but it's something that my colleagues and we've been touching base on as the year ended, and as even in our end of the year celebration that we had, which was which was weird, but it was what are we going to do next? And trying to make sure that people understand that we're here as educators, and we're trying to make sure that they understand that this is a place where they hopefully feel safe to open up if they need to talk.
And if I can ask you, I'm going to switch gears on you here. Yep. Now, Nate played basketball at Chaska High School, which is where I went to high school. I moved from New Jersey to Chaska when I was in 14, so before 10th grade. Played basketball at Chaska, then you went up to St. Cloud State. And most, a lot of people probably can experience this, but you experienced through a basketball situation where, and I don't remember all the numbers, but there were majority white players, but some black players on the team, but everybody came from kind of different areas. You had some people from the suburbs, from Minnesota, some from the city of Minneapolis,
yep.
Some from the suburbs, some from outstate, some from other states. And I'm imagining that's the first time a lot of people had, on a regular basis, even in the sport of basketball, had played basketball with either a white person or a black person on a regular basis on a team. And just from the outside looking in, there seemed to be segregation generally off the court. Get along enough on the court, but you were inside of it. I'm speaking from the outside, but I'm just kind of interested in what your thought was when how you experienced that at St. Cloud.
I would say what you saw is exactly true. I would say looking at it now is off the court. Who I lived with were other white males, and my black teammates, they tended to live with each other. And at the time, I didn't think about any of it. But looking at it in that regards, yeah. Other things in terms of team functions, it was completely different, I think, which was probably the better piece in terms of inclusive. Everybody was there, everybody was doing things, and it didn't have to be basketball related. A lot of times it wasn't. It was more extracurricular activities, having fun. But yeah, so I, thinking about it the way you see it and the way I've looked at it, it's interesting to see why it happened that way. And I don't know if it's just people are more comfortable that way at that time or what. For me, it was most of the freshmen coming in were the people that I ended up rooming with the next year. And that worked out well. So then I just tried to stay that way, but I don't know.
Would you say, Ray, was the football environment similar?
Yeah, I would say it's funny that you mentioned that actually, because several of those players probably were my roommates because I lived with basketball players. Several of them, Sean Whitlock and Enoch, and so what was kind of funny is that at St. Cloud State, just the way things were structured, we were, the football team was primarily white as well. There was probably a smaller percentage of African American or Latino or other players. So it ended up being where some of, I would say, the minority players from the football team would live with the minority players of the basketball team. So it's interesting how you said that, Nate, in terms of how that all worked out. And, I can't fully explain it either. I wasn't necessarily against living with my white teammates or anything like that. I don't think the basketball players were thought of it that way either. But I do think it brought up a good point, which is sometimes it's just the comfort levels that we tend to, flock to sometimes, you know what I mean? And especially being in a place like St. Cloud, a smaller city that's college bound and has had a lot of, obviously race and discrimination issues over the years itself. We dealt with a lot in the university and the curriculum and in the history of St. Cloud. So I think that was a sort of microcosm of America that we as students also probably bonded together more. But I also will say we also did in a lot of activities bond together with a lot of the white players and other players. And I think that we also learned a lot about, our white teammates who came from small town Minnesota. And they learned a lot from us. So that in there's also a crossfire of very beautiful stories that I know to this day exist. Some of those players are some of my best friends to this day. While we live distant, they still reach out to me all the time. I reach out to them. And I think they learned a lot about first encountering a Black or Latino person for the first time on their team. And we had to go play another team together. And so I think sports is a great analogy of unifying because, we had to, and then in that have to, you hope that people open up to learning from each other. Like, what was it like growing up in a small white town? Like, that would be the kind of things that I would start to ask some of my white teammates because I never had that experience. I grew up in New York City and in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So I always grew up in big cities. So I think that was the kind of thing that I think came out of that. But for all players, that wasn't for sure the experience. Like some just never opened up enough to get to know some of us, and so be it. But, for those of us who opened up, I think it was a beautiful experience in that sense.
I don't know who Vic is. I guess he's Bill's friend. I'm curious, Vic, for you to jump.
I just got called out.
You've got a fist and behind you on the wall. Jump in. Tell us what your thoughts are around.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So,
things going on in the country.
So the black and the white on the back is symbolic. My good friend of mine, Justin Ross, his daughter is doing this Black Lives Matter out of chalk and chalk paint.
And you're in Denver?
I'm in Denver. I'm over in Stapleton, guys. And so Justin Ross is African American. I'm Latino. His daughter, she's only 15, 16 years old, obviously a mixed child. And she's providing these paintings out of chalk on people's houses in Stapleton. Half of it goes to, or wherever, I guess. Half of it goes to charity, and then the other half goes to, collaterals for paints and whatever it is that she's doing. So I was so inspired by her by doing this that I felt that this is one thing that every time I see anything on the post about Black Lives Matter, this is, I think, important. So, but my take and my view, we have a systemic problem in America from our education system. And that's why when I started hearing you guys talking about education, I think that's very important. I think that's the root cause for change, or the root area for change. We, as a society, have allowed our educational system to show that the white man was the man that brought freedom and justice to the world. That if you're white, you're right. If you're yellow, you're mellow. If you're black or brown, we got a problem. And when you look at our history books, we're not teaching history. We're teaching a lie. And we have been teaching that lie for many, many years. And I'm talking about forever, right? And I'm not a scholar. I'm not a legislator, so I can't speak to all of the injustices. But when you look at different movements that we've had in our country, especially the most latest one, right? Me Too. My wife is 100% white girl. But as a woman, she's a second-class citizen because we've allowed that as a nation. And the Me Too movement was so powerful. The Black Lives Movement is bigger than all of us. And it's so important that we find a way for America and the world to look at injustice when it comes to racism. And it's very difficult because it's so especially in the American culture, white's right, and it ain't. And this is, when we look at police departments and we look at the shift from police-based commuting or community-based policing and looking at defunding police departments, not getting rid of police departments, but defunding them so that we can change the systemic way that they are operating. It's a huge problem. And one of the biggest things, so I'm just to add one more thing, and I don't want to monologue too much tonight because I love to talk and I love to take the stage, but I myself am a gun prevention violence activist, and I do a lot of stuff fighting gun violence. One of the biggest problems that we have in this country, as we know, is racism. But 45 has been able to stoke these issues and have brought the shadows and the darkness out and have told those others that it's okay for them to be doing what they're doing. So one thing that I tell everybody, and I know this isn't the only answer, and I'm not a scholar, I'm not a legislator, so I don't have the answers. But in order for us to make change, we have to vote for those that are like-minded, that are willing to make the sacrifice, have the hard conversations, and be willing to change America. So with that being said, I wish Obama could just run one more time, or Michelle, because I love them both. That'd be so awesome if they could come back. But anyways, so that's me. Am I on mute? And did I say everything on mute?
You're not on mute.
All right.
Our MC is back.
I'm not the MC.
So here's the crazy thing.
Anybody's allowed to talk at any time. They don't have to wait for me.
So here's the funny thing. As I've been sitting here and listening to you guys, and first of all, it's super inspirational. And I think this is a great forum and a great medium. How do we expand this to have the voice of Colorado, right? I'm assuming everybody's from all over the place, right?
Yeah, we've got
all over.
Minnesota,
Yeah.
Colorado, LA,
Maryland, Wisconsin.
So,
Indiana. Neil, where do you live? Where?
Ohio.
Oh, Cincinnati. Okay. Yeah, he's in Cincinnati.
so how do we bring this forum and how do we make the next step and really have some serious conversations, right? So obviously this is my first call, but how would you feel about bringing some senators on this call or bringing some House representatives on this call and bringing some people that are really should be held accountable, right? 45 is not the guy. And I don't care what your political views are. He's just not the guy for America. However, there are so many senators, so many House representatives, so many legislators that are the right people. And I would love to be able to invite some of those folks on this call. And you're saying, well, shit, I don't know any of those people. The reality is I do. I know several people that would love to be participants of this. So I would love to have a conversation with someone about how do we elevate this to be a conversation that is larger than just a handful of people, and really holding those in our legislators, the people that for the people, by the people, and really ask them the question, what are you doing for us?
Mayor Frey, Minneapolis's Mayor Frey would be, is it Frey or Frey? Did I say it wrong?
Right.
He would be a good one to have on this one. You should reach out to him, get him involved. He would, I mean, obviously it's pertinent because he's the mayor of Minneapolis. And so it'd be really good to have him speak to defunding the police and what that really means and what that looks like. And the changes and things that he sees the city moving forward. Not that Minneapolis is the end all be all or the answer for everyone else, but it's a good start given that.
That's a great start.
Yeah, ground zero is at the moment.